Hey everybody, welcome to episode 34. Today I'm going to go over this particular book, which is the animated special for the X-Men for the pilot episode, Pryde of the X-Men. Um, this came out in 1989. I think it aired in September, pretty sure it aired in September of 1989, and it was part of this Marvel Comics special. I think for us in Rochester, it was, which is the Detroit area. I think we got it on channel 50, which was Fox at the time. Actually, it might have been UPN. No, I don't think it was UPN yet. I think it was still Fox. Um, and it was on Sunday mornings. I think it was at 11 o'clock, I believe. I think it ran from 11 to 12, and they aired like the RoboCop cartoon and what else did they have? RoboCop cartoon. They had Dino Riders, I think. Spider-Man. I think they were just replaying Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which also had an episode with the X-Men in it as well. But they did this episode, and I was super pumped for this. I mean, I loved all the shows in the '80s. I loved G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man, all of that stuff. Galaxy Ranger. I mean, all the shows I watched them pretty avidly, and it appeared to me because they played a little bit of a commercial of it, and it appeared it was going to be. I thought it was Sunbow. Did the animation. I know it was going to be Marvel Comics production because they're the ones who did Transformers and G.I. Joe. But as far as the animation itself, I think was going to be handled by Sunbow. That's what I thought. But I think it was Toei Animation, which also kind of did a very similar style. So I was pretty pumped. It was like, oh wow, it's like the G.I. Joe, cartoon, but with the X-Men. It's like, it seemed like a no-brainer. It seemed like it was a natural progression to put comic books and especially X-Men onto a cartoon, syndicated cartoon they'd play every day after school, or maybe on Saturdays or even Sundays. So I was really pumped for it. I mean, really pumped for it. I mean, that was pretty much '89 was pretty much that was the year of Inferno. And I was curious to see who they were going to do, or who was going to be in the X-Men. Because, at the time it was the Down Under X-Men, and I assumed it would probably be classic X-Men. It just kind of, made more sense to do that, to do, Wolverine. Of course, a lot of them were already in the Down Under X-Men, but to do, like, Wolverine and, classes, but then put Storm in her original costume, do, like, the original Cyclops, his original costume, and then, everything seemed to be perfect in Nightcrawler, except they used Dazzler instead of Rogue, which at the time I thought was really weird. I'm like, I wanted my Rogue, I wanted my Rogue to be in it, and so I could get Dazzler. It's like, okay, well, and it's Dazzler from pretty much the current comic books, meaning it was pretty much the Down Under costume of Dazzler, and like, that's weird. That doesn't make any sense. So there was probably rationale behind it. I don't know exactly what it was. I didn't really dig too deep into anything online to find out why that was. But they didn't use Rogue. They used Dazzler. Otherwise, it was a perfect lineup for the X-Men. I mean, it pretty much had all the classic X-Men in it. With the and even had Shadowcat, well, Kitty Pryde, but she was going to be joining the X-Men, so they're going to retell that origin story, which I really hate when they retell origin stories, and alter anything from the original source material. I'm a purist. I want everything for the most part to be exactly what it is. So, if you're going to do, the first appearance of Kitty Pryde, in the X-Men, then do the first, do issue 129. You're also going to get the first appearance of White Queen, who also was in this cartoon, oddly enough, as part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which also seemed weird. Like, huh? Um, and then Juggernaut was in there as also part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. It didn't make any sense. I mean, I guess they were just like, whatever's the most popular villains, they figured they'd grab and throw in there, but it was weird. It seemed like it was typical. Let's make a show for kids, and let's screw it up. Let's alter the source material. Let's make everything, because for some reason they feel that kids can't handle like certain things. Don't make it violent. Don't make it dark. You've got Chris Claremont and John Byrne, doing like the Dark Phoenix saga. I mean, things get dark, and things, especially if you're going to do right around that time with, first appearance of Kitty Pryde, things were kind of dark. You had the Hellfire Club, that, even though they kind of put, her in her pretty White Queen in her skimpy outfit, they didn't, they weren't going to go total Hellfire Club, which again, always begs the question, who are comics for? Are comics for kids, adolescent kids? Are comics for teenagers? Are comics for adults? Or are comics for everybody? Are they all ages? I'm assuming they're all ages, but then they go dark and use adult themes in a lot of comics, which are marketed towards kids. And then they want to make a cartoon of it, but then they say, well, we can't go dark like the comic, so we've got to market it towards kids. And because it's a cartoon, everybody just assumes animation is for 10-year-olds, or 8-year-olds. So because America can't get past this whole, animated TV, can be for any age. People still, it's cartoons. I mean, I still call them cartoons, but I mean, I don't necessarily think, that they should be for kids per se. I think if you're going to do a comic book in the United States by Marvel Comics, and you're going to deal with themes that may be dark or adult, or have a certain age appropriateness, then you should be able to do animation as well. Maybe don't put it on Saturday mornings. Maybe put it on Friday nights. Maybe you market it towards, it's an older, more sophisticated crowd. I mean, like a South Park, you could put it on a show like that, and that kind of didn't exist at the time. But I mean, I think Simpsons was just starting up, and Simpsons was definitely not, it was all for all ages, but it handled a lot of other themes. I don't know. It just seems like they're trying to go for some weird, audience. I mean, they're trying to go for this all ages, but it's really for kids, but we're going to use the X-Men, but even the X-Men comics deal. And even to this day, I mean, comics still deals in adult things or adult themes and concepts that might be, not appropriate for kids. I mean, the comics get into that stuff all the time. So you just wonder, okay. No, it's odd. That part is odd. I find that odd. However, that said, I think they did a really good job with this show. I'll link. There's a couple. You can find it on YouTube. It's pretty easy. Just look up Pryde of the X-Men, and you'll probably find a couple of different places. I'll try to find a good one, a decent one, some good good resolution, and then and link it in the description. But it is what it is. I mean, I'll get into more of my opinions and stuff on the show. Like I said, I mean, I thought it was going to be perfect. And I would say if they were to change all the stupid things that they'd put in this, it would be absolutely perfect. I don't dislike the 90s animated series. I know it's very popular. I know it's coming back, too. I didn't watch it a lot. I watched it here and there. Again, it was the 90s. I was in my 20s. I really wasn't into this stuff as hardcore as I was when I was in my teenage years. So, I did catch episodes here and there. I kind of paid attention to it, from the sidelines. And again, I'm not a huge fan of the '90s X-Men, even though it's very popular. I know, I'm not a huge fan of Jim Lee. I didn't, it was okay. But I really preferred the more classic X-Men, and especially the Down Under X-Men. So let's go into this time. I've got a CBR of this book. So I just got this book. Just came the other day, or yeah, yesterday, today. It came today. Luckily it's from Thrift Books. And you know what? They did put the Thrift Books label on the front cover, which I'll probably peel off, but at least I can get it off the cover pretty easily there. I don't know. I thought, oh, maybe they got a bunch of my complaints, but I think the reason it is because the spine's not that thick, and they figured it wouldn't really work on the spine, so they put it on the front cover. This is where I would prefer it like back here, like even if they put it like bookstores do it. If you go to Barnes & Noble or something like that, or even sometimes off Amazon, you'll get a barcode that's over the original barcode. Why can't they just do that? Because I'm assuming they're not going to use that original barcode anymore. This is $10.95, by the way. Just want to note that. And I think I paid with tax and shipping $12. So it was pretty accurate to the original cost. It's in great shape, and it kind of lay out. Like I said, I'm going to put the real one up on the screen, or not the real one, I'll put the CBR up so you can see it a little better, and I'll zoom it in a bit. But yeah, it's pretty much, they took the film animation cells, it's a film comic, essentially. Japanese stuff does this a lot. I've got some Akira film comics that belong to my friend. I need to give it back to him sometime, but I still have them. And I've got, I think I had the Dirty Pair Viz ones. I don't have them now. I'd like to get those again, but I had the Dirty Pair Viz comics, film comics, which are really cool. But, yeah, and then they just put, they put them in regular comic book panels and in a magazine format, not really a comic page style, and then put, the captions and dialogue balloons and stuff in, sound effects. I like this. I think it's cool when they do stuff like that. I think it looks neat. Whenever I do like my stuff and I'm parodying like a cartoon specifically, I like to try to make my pages look like this. Just has a neat look to it. It's actually pretty decent, copies of the panels, but also you can still see like the striations and stuff in it, that it's coming from a video. And I don't know, in '89, which probably was produced in '88. I don't know when or how they used their screen captures and their video captures and stuff. I know that Philips Magnavox had a machine out that you could put a video in, or because I don't think DVDs weren't out. You put a videotape in it, and it was a 4-head VCR in it, so it had a really good pause on it, and you could essentially pause it, and then you could get a printout, almost on like a piece of, like a 4x6, photograph. I think it actually used photographic paper, like Kodak photographic paper, and it would photograph the still and stick it on a card. I know that was out at the time, because it was like $500, but I wanted one of those at the time, that Philips Magnavox machine, but I wasn't going to be able to get that anytime soon. Back then, that'd be like $2,000 today. So I didn't get that, but I could have. That would have been nice. And then I think they use that to make the panels. Computers are starting to catch. I know they had Amigas and stuff that could do some pretty fancy things at the time graphically. So they use something else. I'm not sure, but yeah, it came up pretty cool. So I'm glad I got this for a collection. But I'm going to switch it over to the CBR so you can see it better. So there's the cover there, and the scans are pretty decent. But, they kind of go through the, like I said, here you go with how it's laid out with the captions. It's weird. Even I was watching it again. I watched it before just a little while ago, and um, it was weird. I don't know. I would love to see like a really good version of it, and I don't think a really good version exists. I know they use this pilot, and they put this pilot on video cassette. You could buy just the pilot, because that's all it was at the time. It was just a pilot, and it didn't make the cut. They didn't go ahead and green light a full season, which was unfortunate. I mean, I understand why they didn't. There was a lot of dumb things that they did that just didn't seem to work. Um, I think making Kitty Pryde really whiny wasn't really in character. So if you're an X-Men purist, which I try to be, I find her to be very annoying. And it's like she wasn't really annoying in the comic books, especially when she first started. I mean, she was green and she was kind of unsure of herself and scared for a 14-year-old girl. But I mean, outside of that, she got confidence pretty quick, and she was feisty, and she was, kind of stubborn and pig-headed. So she kind of, which they kind of portrayed a little bit of that in this, but not really. Um, and there was more of a relationship with Storm, which they really didn't explore that either. I mean, they didn't have much time, and this was pretty much a pilot episode. And by it, I mean, people thought it was cheesy, and people thought it was too campy. Um, I don't know. I wouldn't say that per se. I mean, I do think that they messed up Shadowcat. I think not putting Rogue in it and putting Dazzler in it. Not that I have anything against the Dazzler character. I just think Rogue would have been a better fit because she's one of the, of that sort of that time. And she joined in '83. So, and Kitty Pryde joined in '80, so it was pretty close to that time period. I think people thought it was weird they put the White Queen in it. I think it was weird. 'Cause she was not a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. She was a member of the Hellfire Club. And throwing Juggernaut in there too just seemed kind of odd. It's just they just needed a big guy. But then they have the Blob in it, who was part of Freedom Force. So that's kind of weird. Like I said, I think that they shouldn't have. I don't know. They shouldn't have called them the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Yeah, it was poor villain choice. I mean, obviously you're going to go with Magneto. I think her portrayal of Magneto was fine. I think it was a little over the top, but not terrible. Professor X was fine. One of the biggest problems, of course, we'll get to him here. Well, here's White Queen. See what I mean? I mean, they wouldn't put her in this kind of costume today in a cartoon, but they seemed to. They got that, pulled that off, which I think would have been nice. They have, there's, her hair is not even the right color. She's supposed to have brown hair. Her hair that does not look like Kitty Pryde. That looks like Tiffany, from that time period, or that doesn't look like her. I think they totally botched Kitty Pryde, which was, a shame, and probably one of the reasons why the show didn't get green lit. There again, there's the Dazzler. Wolverine. So they used an Australian voice actor, or at least an Australian accent. Jesus, everything's going off at once. At the time, Australia was cool. It was the '80s. For some reason, Australia, the Down Under. I mean, you had the Men at Work singing the, song, the Down Under song. You've got, Crocodile Dundee. You've got, whatever else. I remember there's some. I keep thinking of that Outback Jack from WWF Wrestling. Everybody loved Australia in the '80s. Australia was like a cool thing, and Midnight Oil, they're from Australia. That's actually right around this time they had an album out. So I guess that was cool. So take a Canadian and give them an Australian accent. I read a Wikipedia page talks about it a little bit, that they were going to try to change the comic thing to make him really from Australia or whatever, but they didn't end up doing that. So, of course they talk about it's ironic that Hugh Jackman from Australia ends up playing Wolverine in the movie. Just coincidence, but yeah. So they Wolverine's character visually looks fine, and his character portrayal, as in like his attitude and like his demeanor was spot on, but the Australian accent was just dumb. Um, I think Cyclops they nailed dead on perfect. I think it's Flint's voice. The guy does Flint's voice. I don't think it's Duke. I think it's Flint. Oh, no, maybe it is Duke. I think it is Duke. Duke's voice from G.I. Joe. It was just perfect. That's why, again, I thought it's Sunbow. I thought it was Sunbow at first. Nightcrawler's pretty much spot on. He's perfect. Colossus is perfect. Dazzler, even though she didn't say much in it, she's fine. I mean, I don't have any issue with her portrayal. I just wish it was Rogue instead. Storm was pretty much spot on. She had the cool accent. She had the right accent. Her outfit was amazing. Really cool looking too. I think that's all of them. Yeah. So, like I said, a couple of just, head scratchers on why they chose what they went with. Again, making it like that was just odd. But the overall story, for a pilot episode, was actually really good. I mean, they hit all the beats. They introduced characters one at a time by showing them in the danger room. That's always a trope that's fun to do. They did the whole, the kid's gonna stow away in the spaceship or in the airplane, while the adults go off to because it's too dangerous for her, and they do that cliche, which is fine. They do. What else did they do? I think this looks so cool with Storm there. Yeah, and then they just made her bumbly, kind of super scared and bumbly, and it's just like she wasn't like that when she first appeared in the X-Men. They sent him on a little mission there. I think the Blackbird looks cool. There's a couple of really cool beauty shots of it flying in it that look really neat. Again, don't know why they have Juggernaut there. Like if they had Black Tom and Juggernaut together, but people would be like, huh? They gotta have Magneto in there. So they needed a big brute, but even though they had Blob, and Blob was in it, and Blob was portrayed fine. And actually the portrayal of Juggernaut, again, most of the characters were spot on, perfect. And I think, Juggernaut was spot on perfect. Just the question is inclusion. Pyro was fine, spot on. Blob was spot on perfect. It really was amazing. And I was really pumped. I thought it was going to go somewhere. At the same time, though, even watching it as a kid when it first aired, I remember specifically, I was in my mom's trailer. It was a Sunday morning. She had my mom used to give permanents and do she was a licensed beautician for a while, so she would do hair. Like you had old ladies would always come over and get their permanents, to get their poodle hair, and I remember somebody was coming over that day, and then I was waiting for it to show on TV, and then I remember sitting there on the couch waiting for it to show, and it finally showed. I taped it. I had the our VCR, and I taped the episode so I could replay it. And then that was it. And I watched it a few times, and I thought to myself, yeah, it's great, but there's just too many dumb choices in it. I would have like I said, I have nothing against the 90s cartoon. I think it's great. I think it's amazing in its own right. Again, I have some issues with why they changed things from source material, but I guess that's just an inevitable thing. They're always going to do that. They're never going to. If it was me in charge, you've got the stories already written, right? Just turn it into a screenplay from the script, from the comic book. And they sort of, this is written off of the screenplay for this episode, so if they just went, backwards and did that the other way, You know, you need storyboards. That's what your comic is. It's right there. All your storyboards are all laid out. And I would just do shot for shot, scene for scene, what you see in the comic book, and just make it live action. That's what I or animated. That's what I or live action. But that's what I would do. Nobody's going to do that. You know, as much as I wish people would do that, nobody's going to do that for reasons. I've got a few hunches why, but I don't know for certain. Probably because it seems like whenever somebody's in charge of something, they always want to put their own stamp on it. They want to change stuff just for the sake of changing it, just so they can say, I did it this way. Maybe that's it. Maybe the comic, maybe Marvel itself doesn't want that to happen, doesn't want it to be a one-to-one to the comic book. Maybe they think a one-to-one to the comic book wouldn't sell or wouldn't be popular. However, the comic book's popular enough to make a show, so it seems kind of counterintuitive. You know, I mean, the X-Men is so hot and so popular that they wanted to make an animation show. But if you made the comic book, which is how they got popular, then it wouldn't be popular? Well, I don't understand that logic. But, you know, somebody else explain it to me. Don't, you know, whatever you want to say it. But, I mean, you know, explain the logic to me, because I don't get it. You know, like I said, I think this is a great attempt. I just think what needed to happen was, and this is how the X-Men animated this '90s show was created. That was their fix. That was their you know, this is a dry run. It flopped. They probably assessed and said, what failed on it? Let's do it right the next time. And then they did the '90s show shortly thereafter, and that was a success. So, you know, like I said, I would have liked to seen the classic X-Men more. I mean, I really would have liked to seen the Down Under X-Men, but I know they weren't going to do that. But if they did the classic X-Men as the team, I would have enjoyed it a lot more than the Jim Lee X-Men. Of course, you know, most people who are 10 years younger than me, you know, they want, that's their X-Men, you know, that's their, and I understand that. I mean, just like, I guess if you take people that are 10 years younger or older than I am, who were born in '63, you know, the '70s, it would be, you know, but that's, you know, that would be, I wouldn't say it would be the classic X Factor X-Men, because that was failing, but, you know, I guess the '75 X-Men, which essentially is the classic X-Men, you know, so maybe because of that, I don't know, but because there's such a jump and change from my generation to the next gen, you know, at the time I was, 89, I was 15, almost 16, so figure people who were 15 or 16 in '95 or whenever they aired the original X-Men cartoon, or the '90s X-Men cartoon. You know, 10 years, I would say it's probably 8 or 10 years younger than me. That generation likes this, and then a little bit younger, of course, or likes the '90s version. So, again, I don't have anything wrong with it. I need to go sit back and watch. I've watched most of the '90s thing, gone back and watched it. It's on Disney Plus and whatnot, and I've watched most of it. Again, I mean, I like it, I enjoy it. I don't like that time period. I like this stuff better. But it is what it is. Like I said, it's a neat little thing that exists, because it gave us it was the first time something like this could have happened, and it would have been amazing if they did it right the first time, and it was greenlit and it became something that would have been amazing. But that's not what happened. So it is what it is. It'll still, I'll still enjoy it for what it is, But yeah, I mean, what can you do? What can you do? The '90s animated shows for Marvel proved a lot more popular than the predecessors. I mean, the Spider-Man cartoon was amazing, and that is great. I just watched a few episodes the other day. and I really like the Spider-Man, the 90s one. Um, even the Hulk was okay. Oh. Fantastic Four was okay. The Iron Man one was okay. But yeah, obviously the Spider-Man and the X-Men were the most popular. But again, I keep talking about this. Spider-Man and the X-Men is what made Marvel so popular, especially in the 80s and especially into the 90s. So, I would say throughout the entire 90s. And that's why Sony wanted to buy the rights to make a movie for both Spider-Man and X-Men, and that's why when Marvel was down on its luck and was, going through financial woes, most of it self-inflicted, that's because, that's why they sold it off, the rights to it, because that was their hottest property. People who think that, again, I don't want to keep beating the dead horse, but people keep thinking that, it's been the Avengers was the most popular. It's just like, I honestly have to say, I don't know anybody who cared about the Avengers in the 80s. I mean, outside the West Coast Avengers, people kind of liked. I kind of liked it, even though it was okay, but I still liked it. But the Avengers comic itself in the 80s, like I said, She-Hulk wasn't popular until she joined the Fantastic Four, even though she was in the Avengers originally, but she was a lot, John Byrne made her popular in that. Captain America wasn't a big comic then. Thor was big. Walt Simonson's Thor was big. No matter what I think about Walt Simonson, that was big. The Hulk was big, especially when the Hulk went gray, back to gray, to kind of the time when McFarlane did a little bit like the Wolverine and Hulk issue by McFarlane. And that stuff was hot. I mean, the Hulk was popular. Hulk's pretty much always been popular, I think. I said Captain America comic actually going back and reading it, all those Mike Zeck issues, actually is very good. But, I don't think anybody really talked about it much back in the 80s. At least my circle of friends and people that I know, it was all X-Men, Spider-Man, and then towards the end of the 80s, it was all, 89, 90, it was McFarlane, Liefeld, that camp, the guys that created Image. I mean, that was what everybody loved back then. Arthur Adams. And none of those guys really tackled the Avengers per se. Like I said, McFarlane did some Hulk issues, whatnot. So Jim Lee actually started with Alpha Flight. But, I think Alpha Flight was more popular than the Avengers at that time. They could have done something more with the Alpha Flight. Now, granted, the best Alpha Flights are the ones by John Byrne, but, the ones that came later and the Jim Lee ones were good too. They're not as good as the John Byrne ones, but they're still good. So, I figured this wasn't going to be a super long one, because, it's just one episode, so it's hard to kind of, say, as far as outside of that initial response with me, that day I taped it on VHS, and I think the VHS kind of circulated around, and I think my other buddy here ended up recording it as well. I think he kind of, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he kind of probably had the same sentiments that I did. He's like, this could have been so great. Well, what was going on? Why do they keep doing these? Why did they do these goofy things? I think that was the general consensus. Was everybody was excited, everybody felt let down, and we really didn't see any vindication at that time until, into the 90s with the animated series. And like I said, for me, I was kind of out of it that time. Like I said, I was out of all comics for the most part. Specifically Marvel and DC and even a lot of independents. I was out by 93. I was done. I was on to other things. I liked other things of, similar ilk. As far as, I was reading a lot of Heavy Metal magazine. I was reading a lot of the European guys, a lot of Moebius and Milo Manera, and a lot of the more adult stuff I really liked. What's his face? Or the Bethlehem Steel. I loved Druna. Druna was like one of my favorite things, and I really got into that. I'm gonna have to do an episode on my experience with anime. But for me, my anime watching, as far as Japanese animation, stuff coming from Japan, Japanese shows and comics or manga, I could fit everything that I like, and I could everything that I liked from Japan at the time. I could count on one hand. You know, I'm not gonna. I'll go into it in the video itself because I've got a story behind that. I mean, like I said, I was there when it got popular in the United States, and I kind of, there was a whole story behind getting into it and how that all evolved. And it did influence me and my artwork and stuff. But I felt it was short-lived. I mean, I did kind of like anime a little bit into the 90s, and I liked when Sailor Moon was on. I got into Sailor Moon. But again, I'll get into my anime experience in its own separate video. I don't think it's a two-parter. I think I can pretty much cover it in one episode. I just have to put together what I'm going to show. I don't really own any manga anymore, and I don't, all the anime and stuff you can get in various places. You probably watch a lot of it on YouTube. So I'll pull up some stuff, maybe some images, and make an image file. And we'll just go through the image file of things that are just quintessential things that make me think of anime or my anime experience. We'll do that. But all right, so that was this book. Let's see. As far as I got the other Ninja Turtle book, I'm going to do. Now that I'm thinking about the anime thing, I'm going to look into that. Maybe tomorrow's episode, I'll jump into anime because it's popular, and I'm sure it's the stuff that I like is called Dadame or Danime. Danime? I think it's called Dadame or something like that, or Dad's Anime or whatever. Because it's of a certain time period, and there's shows like Robotech. I mean, that in itself, Robotech deserves its own episode, I think. But I will touch on it because it's integral. It's an integral part of my anime experience. But yeah, I think I'll do that. I think I'll research up that. If I don't do it tomorrow, I'll do it shortly thereafter. But because what was this, the 34th episode or something like that? So I think tomorrow would be a Friday episode. So maybe I'll touch on it. If not, I'll do something else. But like I said, I'll probably wait on the Ninja Turtles book till next week and get into that. Like I said, I want to kind of spread this out and not kind of just harp on the same thing day after day. Maybe people like that. I don't know, but I feel like at least I like to jump around a bit because it's just what I do in general. I jump around from things. So, all right, we'll call it at about 38 minutes, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye bye.